Confession time. My favorite character in Arcane is Mel. My second favorite is Sevika. And the reason why I love her so much, even more than Jinx, who is a close third and would always have my heart, is because Sevika speaks to something I've dealt with most of my adult life since I entered the workforce and got a job. The existential dread that I'm in over my head and everything is seconds away from blowing up in my face. Yes, people. I'm talking about that most dreaded imposter syndrome and how it was through Sevika as a character that I finally came to a realization. Sometimes, being aware that you might be terrible at a job might just mean that you're the person who's most likely not to screw things up too badly. Which, of course, has me wondering, who else suffers from imposter syndrome? Show of hands, please. However, before I get fully into that conversation, hello, I'm Noria. Welcome to my channel, where I do media analysis, whether it be shows, movies, video games, anime, or books. I make new videos every weekday. Who knows, I might introduce you to a new show, bring a perspective to a character you might not have considered, affirm something that you already know, or raise a point you disagree with completely. Be that as it may, do consider subscribing, like this video if you enjoy it, consider supporting me on Patreon if you can. And with that said, let's get back to the video. Now, whenever I think of Sevika in terms of her leadership qualities and lack of, and how that reflects a lot of fears that we tend to have as we navigate the workspace and consider whether or not we should put ourselves forward for an opening or a position that we assume is way out of our league, I often think of her interaction with three characters and how through that relationship we see the progression of Sevika's capabilities, even when she's most oblivious to said capabilities for most of the story, namely Vanda, Silco, and Jinx. But before we get into the discussion about Sevika's imposter syndrome and how her journey through the 2 seasons of Arcane reflect how in real time those of us who do suffer from it or have to navigate that feeling of inadequacy in our lives can slowly ease out from it and find ourselves on the other side, i.e. Sevika finding herself on the council at the end of the season representing Zaun. There's a need to start with the definition of what imposter syndrome is. Imposter syndrome, which in basic terms is the feeling of inadequacy that individuals deal with even in the face of their own competence and achievements, which has them doubting their abilities, feeling that they would eventually be seen as a fraud by others when the truth is discovered that they don't really know what they are talking about and are not suited for the role or job that they occupy. In the paper Prevalence, Predictors and Treatment of Imposter Syndrome, a systematic review, co-authored by Bravata, Watts, Kiefer, Madhusudan, Taylor, Clark, Nelson, Cockley, and Hag, they have this to say about people who are dealing with imposter syndrome. These individuals cannot internalize their success and subsequently experience pervasive feelings of self-doubt, anxiety, depression, and or apprehension of being exposed as a fraud in their work, despite verifiable and objective evidence of their successfulness. They also went on to add that imposter syndrome as a term was first described in 1978 by Dr. Suzanne Imes and Pauline Rose Clance as an observation first noticed among successful women and other marginalized groups. Of course, its application has since broadened to be something that applies to a lot of high-functioning individuals who feel the existential dread that is the worry that they really aren't good enough and that one day this would become evident for others to see. Now, the reason why I defined imposter syndrome and also made mention of the fact that it was first observed among women and members of marginalized groups is because Sevika as a character fits this analogy to a T. Whether it's by virtue of her being a Zaunite, a woman, someone with a disability, or someone who clearly doesn't have the same level of education or scientific smarts that people like, say, Sigurd, Jinx, Echo, Jace, or Victor have. You can see the seeds for why she would believe herself incapable of filling that leadership role by the time we get to Act 2, Season 2, when she has to rally the Zaunites to the cause. Now, I'd said earlier that Sevika's journey is linked to 3 people, and I'd like to go into details on that first. The first time we see Sevika, it's in her connection to Vanda, Sevika, like the rest of the people of Zaun who have made their way to Vanda's bar, see him as the revolutionary who once fought for Zaun against the oppression and the inequality meted out by Piltover, which is highlighted strongly with the force and brutality that is the enforcers. In her first showing, we see Sevika for who she is. Someone who has fought and bled for her people and now looks to Vanda, who she believes is the one who can help them continue the fight and resist Piltover's tyranny. In this instance, we see Sevika not being in any leadership role really. Instead, she's a loyal follower, hoping that the man she supports will do what is right for their people and tell them where to go and who and how to fight. Is what she's always known Vanda as, the man who takes action. Even if people die in the process, at least they are dying for something and fighting towards their common goal. Unfortunately, however, Vanda urges caution instead. And she realizes that the man who she supported and would rush into battle at his word has changed, softened, forgotten his priorities. His concerns aren't for Zaun anymore, but for his children for whom he feels responsibility. Now, I'm not knocking down Vanda for doing what he can for the kids. It's clear he feels guilt for how his past actions and rebellion he pushed for led to the death of their parents. That guilt is something he clearly carries with him, and I understand it. But Sevika at that point was in her role as a follower, as someone who needs others to make the decisions and point her in the direction she should go. She needed more than what Vanda was saying. If you're someone who's had a job at some point in your life, we often start a bit lower down the totem pole, doing work that is basically us following the guidance and instructions of our bosses and supervisors. And let me tell you, when your supervisor is giving directions and instructions that are not in alignment with what you signed up for on day one of orientation, there's a feeling of helplessness and frustration that has you focused on how best to get out of Dodge before everything collapses. Now, a lot of people have spoken about Sevika's loyalty and how that is a core part of her story and characterization, and I agree wholeheartedly with them on that. I have no interest in belaboring the point. Instead, my interest in Sevika is how she applies to work and our competencies within it. After realizing that Vanda isn't able to give her what she wants, she switches over to a new boss, Silco. To her, Silco aligns well with her goals and her ideals. He's fully focused on the goal to help Zaun and give them the power they need to fight their oppressors. Now, before you say it, yes, I know, Silco was also working with the enforcers. Yes, he too was double dealing in a way, and Shima was devastating to the Zaunites. My point isn't on the morality of Silco, but instead, it's on whether he did find an avenue to give Zaun the power that they could use to fight back. Whether or not Sevika would read his actions as a means to an end, with a clear end of not peace and cohabitation like Vanda was aiming for, but the eventual destruction of Piltover, which was Silco's endgame. Silco gave her purpose again and clarity with regards their goals and objectives, and it is within these parameters that we see her start to really flesh her leadership abilities. She becomes Silco's second in command in Zaun. Not Jinx, who was always walking on the edge, a step away from the madness that would see everything around her reduced to blood and ash. But Sevika, methodical, feared, intelligent, calculating, brutal, strong Sevika. The qualities that has her skyrocketing up the chain of command. She went from being another lackey, a grunt whose job it is to only take commands, to becoming someone who can walk into a room and challenge her boss on what she considers a major weakness of his, and how he's basically screwing their people over for the sake of Vanda's daughter, who is now adopted as his own as well. But even though she objects to Silco's decisions as they pertain to Jinx, she still follows his lead. Because even though she does have command over some of their troops and ground forces, she still defers to him as the boss and leader, and his word stays no matter how she might disagree with it. In her interaction with Silco, I see reflected in Sevika what work feels like when you are allowed some responsibility and given your own team to command. You have some control over the group, but only as far as your boss allows it. Because somewhere at the back of your mind, you know they can pull the brakes at any point. And yet, it is this fact that they still hold the reins and can step in to control things should the situation call for it that is a bit comforting. That realization that if things go belly up, there's still someone higher up than you that you can call, which provides you with a feeling of safety as you acclimatize to a new role. It's something I see reflected in Sevika's interaction with Silco, which is markedly different from Vanda, with whom she had no power and wasn't in a leadership role per se. Contrast this to when Silco dies and it is up to Sevika to hold the line with the Kem Barons who were all chomping at the bits, ready to go wild. It speaks to how far she's come that she's able to speak and they listen to her, urging them to focus on what matters and prioritize their resistance to Piltover's mounted pressure on Zaun. Of course, Smeech doesn't listen and is blasted to smithereens for that, but oh well, it's what it has deserved. But we see in her interactions with the Kem Barons that even though she held authority within their ranks, Sevika still looked quite like she didn't fit. Like she was role-playing, waiting for the actual true leader to show up and take on the reins. It was in how she held herself, like she was out of her comfort zone. And then Jinx shows up, and with Issa, they start to form a quasi-family. Then when Zaun needs a figure to rally behind, she tries to stir up the crowd. And this is where we see her fears fully realized. Sevika is worried that she doesn't have the charisma to lead Zaun. That instead they need a leader that they can rally around, who is charismatic and for whom they would walk into hell should there be a need for it. And Jinx is the one who gets to fill that role. But here's the thing, Jinx doesn't want it. She might have the charisma, but she doesn't have anything else that the people of Zaun actually need to succeed in what their desires are. And although Sevika realizes this, she's willing to take the step back anyway and have Jinx be in the spotlight because to her, she doesn't have what it takes to be a leader. Jinx does. Which makes no sense when you think about it because other than Echo, Sevika is the only other person in that space who does have what it takes to lead the people of Zaun. The only problem is that she doesn't believe that she's the best for the job, hence why she steps back. And I see in that action something that I witness every damn time at work. Something I myself have also actively done. The fear that you believe you aren't good enough for a job or good enough for a role and that there's someone who is charming and even though they are mostly incompetent, they are well liked enough that they can fit into that role and everyone would probably make allowances for their shortcoming as long as they are in said role. And in so doing, we shortchange ourselves and keep ourselves from chasing a position that we otherwise would do well enough in. All because of our fear of screwing things up. And I know, Sevika comes off as being very strong. Matter of fact, she is. She's one of the strongest women we have in the show. Physically, at least. But Sevika is also very emotionally vulnerable and fragile. And I think a lot of people miss this when they think of her characterization. It is Sevika's fears that she would be terrible at being the leader of Zaun that keeps her from trying. And yet, from an outsider's perspective, we know that she's the only one that managed the inter-gang rivalries that would have popped up and bloodied the streets of Zaun after Silco's passing. She's the one that managed the egos, cooled tempers, got everyone working in alignment and trying not to backstab each other when clearly we all know that the passing of a mob leader, especially one as prominent as Silco, should ideally have plunged Zaun into chaos. Sevika did all of that on her own. And yet, if you had asked her, she would have convinced herself and us, the viewers, that she's not a good leader for Zaun. Which is funny, because the good leaders before her, Vanda and Silco, in their own ways, lost track of what they should have focused on. They should have treated every single Zaunite as worthy of the protection they only extended to their daughters. They failed in that regard. And it is Sevika who is convinced that she's not a good candidate for the job that does well. In fact, one could say that it is most likely her fear that she's not good for the role that would have her extra focused, dotting all the I's and crossing all the T's to make sure that her people are protected and cared for. Because to her, she has to put in so much effort to be worthy of that responsibility. And that is something that I think people who deal with imposter syndrome, like me, would definitely relate to. It's why I was cheering extra hard when I saw that Caitlyn handed her, and by extension Zaun, the Kiraman seat. Because yes, I would have also loved to see Echo in that role, but my constantly battling with imposter syndrome ass saw that as a clear and definite win. But that's just me. What about you? Did you also read Sevika's journey as one reminiscent of the workplace and imposter syndrome? Or did my words give you something new to consider about her character? Please let me know in the comments. Like this video if you've gotten this far and haven't liked it yet. Share it if you want to. Support me on Patreon if you can. And until tomorrow's video, do remember, obsessing over the things you love, perfectly valid coping mechanism.